Hey folks, I'm Spencer, and on today's episode of Cult Mania, we're looking at the punk rock dystopian world of Burst City. Released in 1982, Burst City was directed by Gakuryu Ishii, or Sogo Ishii as he is credited here. The film, as far as I can tell, is set in like a sort of dystopian future Japan. There's a bunch of young punks, in terms of like the music punks, not just damn you punks, who've set up this sort of shanty town that they live in. But I mean, really all they seem to do there is put on punk concerts and drag race. There's this like clan of, I think, Yakuza that sort of want to develop that land, so they need to get rid of them. And there's also a bunch of homeless people that live in like a rundown factory who are all sort of crazy person stereotypes, which isn't great. Oh, and there's two guys on a motorbike that turn up and they start like living with the homeless people. You can gather this film isn't massively strong on plot because, I'll be honest, I had no idea what was going on for most of this film. Or even once I did. Actually, no. I just didn't really know what was happening. This is pretty much due to two reasons. The most obvious reason is I don't think the film really cares about explaining what's happening. I think it just thinks you'll just go with it, which I can understand, to be honest. There are plenty of other films that just launch you into this world. I just personally would have liked a little bit of text at the start that said, it's the year such and such, and Japan's economy has fallen apart, and thus blah 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 blah. That would have been helpful. This isn't also helped though by the fact that the film doesn't really have any characters to speak. I mean, it has people in it. They're not really characters. The main cast are made up of members of Japanese punk bands, notably the Rockers, the Roosters and the Starlings, which are all not great band names, who, as far as I can tell, are just playing themselves. And no one ever calls them by anything, I don't think. You can really tell I was really confused during all of this film. And all these people, like, they look really cool, and I'm not just saying that because there's a lot of quiffs and moustaches going on, but generally, you know, these are really cool looking people. There's a heck of a lot of leather going on, and people really can pull it off. But I wouldn't say anyone can really act. Not that they have much to act. There's not a fat lot of dialogue. There's just a lot of shouting, really. And being sort of angry at the system. Actually, one character has a lot to do. One of the guys that I said was on the motorbike, neither of those talk. But one of them just screams. A lot. And it's a really weird scream because he's not putting in the most effort, and oh my god, it is the most, he's possibly the most annoying character that I have ever seen in a film. Right, okay, there is one scene where he wakes up and there are some people around that he's not expecting. This is what happens. Ah! 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 That's it. There's probably more emotion in my voice doing that. I mean, sweet Jesus. It was annoying. Like, again, because these are just characters that just do things, but with no real purpose. It is a film in which things happen in front of your eyes, and that's it. There are plenty of films that have sort of ropey plots, bad acting, and get away with it because they're really visually interesting, or, you know, there's just something really innovative about it. And Burst City kind of manages to pull this off. As I said, everyone in the film does look really cool, and there are some really nice visual touches. There's a lot of locations that are, you know, very industrial. There's lots of like spray paint. It has a sort of diesel punk, cyberpunk-ish aesthetic that is really good, and I can tell. I mean, you know, this is 82. It's before a lot of really big films that would do this style. You know, it's before Tetsuo is, you know, definitely connected to this film, and the camera work can be really, really good, noticeably in how the film opens, which is like they've strapped the camera to the front of a car or a motorbike and it's just whizzing through the streets, and you've got all the street lights are like streaking because of however they've got the shutter speed, and it's all sped up. It's really kinetic. That's really cool. It's probably the coolest thing in the entire film, which is a shame because it's, you know, from second one. But, you know, the concert footage is really good. You can tell that the sound isn't coming from that, but I'll get to that later. But, you know, there are bits where the camera is in the crowd being jostled about, and that works really well. There's a lot of bits where the camera, it's like someone handed the camera to Neo from The Matrix as he's doing like the whoa stuff, because like the camera will just like do weird sort of tracking up. It's sort of rotating. That sort of stuff is cool. It can be a bit disorientating because it does it sometimes way too much and you're like, ugh. But again, it tries these really cool things. But then it runs into problems. Notably, this film is so dark. So much of it takes place at night, and I don't know whether it was a stylistic decision or whether it was just a case of this is how it was easier to set things up. A lot of scenes have like a light source, often weirdly behind people, which means that it's facing the camera. So there are times where it's like you're looking at stuff that's really dark. Like I said, everyone's dressed in black leather. It's night. They're stood next to a black car. There's one light sort of shining behind everyone. So they sort of trimmed. And there are so many points, especially like the last 20 minutes, last half an hour, where I was just like, I can't see a thing. It's just shapes. It's just someone's bald head is the only thing that is like capturing light. This is made worse by the fact that anytime someone's driving or fighting, the camera decides that they increase the speed of the film. It runs at like ×2 speed. So not only is everything chaotic, it's going really fast, and it's not good. So you've got that. It's on really cheap film stock. The transfer in this isn't great. I mean, I'm presuming that is because the stock isn't very good. It's so grainy, and a lot of the time the blacks look quite blue, which I know is an issue with film stock, but it's really noticeable here. There are some points where I just thought, this sequence looks incredibly crap looking compared to the last scene. And I was like, I can't tell because there's not any notes about the transfer really, apart from that it came from Toei. And I don't know if it's that they've had to splice like non-negative footage in. It's really disorientating. Also, there are two scenes that are in black and white, and I don't know whether they ran out of colour film stock, so they just had to do those in black and white. To be honest, the whole film might have been better in black and white because it looks really stylish in those scenes. But yeah, I don't know. Every now and again it does something really cool, and then it kind of ruins it a couple of minutes later. I mean, basically, the whole end of the film, like the that last 30 minutes just looks like this. Now, one of the main reasons that I wanted to see Burst City was because I was like, oh, it's got Japanese punk bands in it. It's got songs by Japanese punk bands from the 80s, which is a sort of blind spot. You know, I love Japanese music, but that's a bit of a blind spot for me. So I was like, cool, I'll get to discover some cool bands. And to be honest, the songs in this, they're very much punk songs, but they're very good punk songs. I mean, one of them, I swear, is just Bored of the USA by The Clash, but with different lyrics. Even my wife, who was sat doing work behind me while I was watching it, thought that it was The Clash, so that's something to be aware of. But no, all the songs are really good. It's proper like 3-chord thrash stuff, but a good version. And I really like the actual score itself. There's like some really cool sort of tribal drumming style stuff going on. There's some sort of weird synth. It isn't entirely punk based, which I'm guessing is that they had to get someone who could vaguely compose something to do the rest of it. But that stuff's really good. I definitely think Akira perhaps took a slight bit of influence, or it could just be that there was a cultural thing about sick drumming at the time. But that's definitely there. You do run into the problem, and this isn't something I'm going to necessarily critique the film for. Some of the songs, because like I said, they're piped in recordings, they're not playing live, being recorded live. Some of them are really tinny sounding. The songs don't have a lot of oomph or bass to them, but I'm going to guess that's because they're low, you know, they're DIY punk bands. It's just that the songs have always sounded like that. That's not the film's fault. The problem can be that, especially some of the tinnier songs, can be really quiet in the mix. And when you have all of that shouting, because people in this film just love to shout, the songs are so buried that sometimes it just sort of, all of the sound sort of congeals into this sort of sonic, clumpy, porridgey mess. You can't focus on any specific piece of the sound design. Oh, I am going to say as well, I mean, it's an 80s Japanese exploitation film. It always seems to come up. There's some rapey stuff in here. Like, the Yakuza boss is a absolute creep who wears like a cagey body harness thing and is rapey, and there is a death of a character in this that is so bleak and uncomfortable out of nowhere, and it really lingers on it. It doesn't earn this horrible death. The film doesn't do enough to make it justified, and it put me in a really bad mood for the last like half an hour, because I was like, this is depressing, and it lingers on it for a long time, and I just went, this was like vaguely a fun film up until this point, and then that happened, and it really bothered me, like to the point I was like, I don't even know if I want to finish this, but I did, because I couldn't have reviewed it if I hadn't finished it. This might surprise people, but I don't hate Burst City. It could have been so much better. It could have been a bigger, better film. Actually, it shouldn't have been bigger. It should have been 80 minutes. The film's 2 hours, and there's not enough content in it to make it 2 hours, let alone me having enough interest to want to sit through 2 hours of it. And I find it really weird, given that, you know, punk songs, the punk aesthetic, it's all, you know, short, sharp, 3-minute songs is like the maximum. So I find it really weird that they decided to stretch this film over 2 hours. There is a part of me that wonders if it was an 80-minute film that didn't have the punks in it. And then they were like, oh, we can get these people and we'll put them in it. Because they don't really impact the vaguest amount of plot that is going on, to be honest. When I was watching it, the film that it most reminded me of is Derek Jarman's Jubilee, which is also, you know, a film made during punk that is sort of interested in that. It's a far better film than Jubilee is. Jubilee I absolutely hated with a passion, because partly because it has a lot of the same issues as Burst City does, that, you know, it's not about anything, nothing really happens, but at least Burst City isn't pretentious. It doesn't feel like it's doing enough. It's too in love with the people in the film. It's too kind of in love with itself that it forgets to give anyone else a reason to watch it. It massively owes a debt as well to, in my mind, Funeral Parade of Roses, which is a far better film. Like, some of the cinematography, the speeded up footage definitely comes from that. That's a far better subculture film because it manages to make you care about its characters, not just because they're like someone that you might recognise. Go and watch Funeral Parade of Roses, that's brilliant. I'll do a video on that at some point. I would still recommend Burst City if you are a 80s exploitation films made in Japan fan who's into like the works of Sakamoto, into Akira, into that sort of era of Japanese sci-fi exploitation-y horror-y stuff, because it came out in 82. It's way older than a lot of the stuff you know, and you can tell that like someone like Sakamoto must have seen this and took influence from it. That makes it worth checking out if you are a fan of that stuff. But it's a way worse version of those ideas. It is very much the prototype version. Also, I guess if you love the Roosters or the Rockers, it's cool. You'll probably get more of a kick out of seeing them on screen. I was like, I don't know who these people are, but I don't know, and I didn't know why I needed to care. So, if you have an interest in that sort of stuff, it's worth checking out. I would make sure you watch it on a telly, get the Blu-ray and watch it on a telly. Don't try and stream it on your laptop because you won't see a thing. It'll just be a black screen. But it is worth checking out for a sort of cool history tidbit. I wouldn't recommend it for anyone else, really. It's a curiosity rather than some. You know, I'm not planning on rewatching it anytime soon. But that is just my opinion. Have you seen Burst City? Did you love it? Let me know down in the comments. Like and subscribe so you don't miss any more videos. And I shall see you next time.